The Lagos state government earlier this week denied an allegation by Labour Party governorship candidate during the last elections in the state, that's Gbadebo Rhodes Viva, that the state government funded Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu's post-election legal cases. Now, in a statement reacting to the allegation, the State Commissioner for Information, that's Benga Omotosho, said it was just a ploy to deceive the public. The Commissioner called on those interested in scrutinizing the finances of Lagos State to anchor their inquiry on verified facts. Well, here is Benga Omotosho speaking specifically on this issue earlier on Monday on the morning show.
First, there is a matter that you mentioned before we came into this, which I consider more serious, that Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the governor, paid lawyers legal fees from the state treasury. I say here now categorically that there was nothing like that. It's all false, it's all fake. It's from incredible sources. There was something that was brought up, and Mr. Sanwo-Olu refused to approve it because the person who may have prepared the paper may have been somebody who is not knowledgeable about such matters. You can't spend state funds on political disputes or political matters in whatever guise. So Mr. Sanwo-Olu knows this very well. So the Attorney General and Mr. Sanwo-Olu, they refused to pay that money, and it was not approved. If anybody has any proof that a dime of the state's money left the treasury on this particular matter, the person should just bring it out.
Now, Ayodele Adio is a political analyst and managing editor of the Avalon Daily. He joins us now to look at this matter for a while. Good afternoon and warm welcome to Newsday.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Right, let's get into it. Of course, following this, Rhodes Viva has responded and brought out receipts, as the Gen Zs would say, saying that, well, this information is very readily available on the procurement agency website. So many conflicting statements. What are you taking away from this, your initial takeaways?
I mean, first of all, when the story broke, Mr. Doherty had published the details of some of these frivolous spendings. And of course, there was outrage, not just on social media, but I mean, general citizens of Lagos State were outraged with the kind of spending that they saw, particularly on that list. And one of those outrageous things on the list was that payments were made to settle the legal bills of the governor, I think against the PDP candidate, right? And as well as other several frivolous expenditure that were made. And I think that firstly, the Commissioner for Information had earlier, denied that the documents that were being circulated on social media was fake. But if you simply go to the website of the Lagos State Public Procurement Agency, and you simply looked at the January award, items 16 to 19, it's clearly stated there. And if you looked at the title of the document, it clearly says that the January award, which means it was already awarded, by the government. And, so I'm shocked that it looks like we're beginning to play hanky-panky here. I paid, you didn't pay, show me a receipt of the transaction. Because there's no way you and I can find a receipt of that transaction to, prove exactly whether a payment was made or not. The only documents that we can rely on is the document that is in the Lagos State Public Procurement website, which clearly stated the January award was made to the effect, to settle certain payments, which were legal payments in that regard. But you see, I'm glad that one thing has been made clear, whether or not you and I can prove whether those payments were made or not. I think there's some understanding, even from the Commissioner himself, that those kinds of payments are unacceptable, that you cannot use public resources and expend them in such a very insensitive and a very frivolous manner, especially using public resources to settle a legal score for the governor. I think that has been established, and it's clear and it's well admitted, by the Commissioner himself. So, I mean, the idea that people were forging documents and circulating on social media is completely false. And it's just a strawman argument, because clearly these things were downloaded from the website, of the procurement agency, and it's hard to disprove.
It certainly is. Now, do you think that Lagos State can rebrand from this narrative? Because it seems history repeats itself. We had a similar issue after the tenure of Governor Fashola, and Governor Ambode revealed what he called frivolous spending on a website, if you remember clearly. So it seems like this is an endless cycle happening, and it gets exposed, one or two PR plays happen and then we move on. Is this a brand we should accept? As citizens, what do we want? Because it's been brought to light. But at what point do we see accountability? At what point do we see correction?
Let me say very clearly that the political leadership of our country today is the reflection of what citizens have tolerated and what citizens have permitted. That is why we continue to share the burden of irresponsible governance, while those in office continue to share the bounty of being in office, right? And except we put our foot on the ground and demand more from those that we elect, these things are not going to change. And I think it's important to also put proper context to these things. To say that Nigeria are currently facing record inflation, the highest in 25 years. Food inflation is about 30%, transportation inflation is about 28%. And you know that the average household expenditure is 67 to 68% on food and transportation. That means the purchasing power of the average Lagosian has dwindled drastically. People are sleeping in their offices because they cannot commute back and forth their houses. And people are asking for the basic support that they need to survive. And the Lagos State government, for instance, has just stopped the subsidy it had on public transportation. So in one hand, you're telling the Nigerian people to consistently sacrifice. And the only thing, even though the government continues to claim that on an average is saving at least ₦1 trillion, which means more resources for federal and state governments. And yet we can't subsidize just public transportation. But what do we see? We see frivolous spending, purchasing of brand new SUVs from foreign car manufacturing. And of course, to be honest, I was greatly disappointed when I listened to the, I think it was the budget DG, when you posed the question on the morning show that why did they have to buy a foreign SUV brand, and he said he didn't know about Nord Motors, which is just down the corridor here. So how is it that the public official in Lagos can clearly say on TV that he does not know an automobile brand in Lagos State that has been on your own show regularly and is trying to build something of substance in Lagos State? So it shows you the level of disconnect between the governed and those in governance. And how do you support the economy? How do you support the everyday Nigerian if there is this level of disconnect? So I think that, listen, Nigerians are the best people to lead in the world. And I say this because so much has been thrown at them and they continue to give people in government a very long rope. The streets of Chile, San Diego precisely, was flooded with millions of protesters because the government raised the cost of public transportation by 4%. Mind you, the GDP per capita in Chile is $18,000. You compare that with just $2,000 that we have here in Nigeria. I mean, earlier this year, Israel were protesting for 30 weeks non-stop because of a judicial reform that they did not agree with. The GDP per capita of the average Israeli is $58,000. So we're such a poor country, and yet we take so much from our leaders and they continue to throw this at us. So I would expect that, not just, you see, this is not just a Lagos affair, because we continue to see revelations from several states across the country with the kind of frivolous spending that we see people in government are making. And I hope that they sit down and introspect and they reflect on what they are doing to the Nigerian people, to say that this group of people have given us so much and have taken so much beating over time. And all they're asking for is a level playing field, some sort of push and some sort of support from their government, and to show some level of frugality, especially at such a time where we are having one of our worst economies in close to 2 decades. Our economy can't be doing this bad, and people are spending in the ways that they are spending.
Now, very quickly before we go, we just have 1 minute. And, speaking into sort of your tone, it's reflective of what we heard former President Olusegun Obasanjo making reference to when he proposed Afro-democracy. In your take on this, do you think our process is flawed right from the electoral process, or is it ingrained within us? Do you feel any change in how we elect our leaders or how we select who governs us will change how our resources are shared? Very quickly, in 30 seconds.
Well, I mean, I think there has to be a lot of reforms, but particularly our electoral system tends to throw up, people who have large access, to resources, whether it's financial or connected to the political elite in Nigeria. And so people with bold ideas who probably can add a lot of value into government are unable to navigate their way through many of these dominant political parties, because it's the amount of money that you have that will determine if you get a ticket or if you're able to have your name on the ballot for national elections, right? So until that changes, until we create a system, wherein ideas will continue to govern the affairs of our country and not brute force and the amount of money that you have in your pocket, and we're likely not to see change. But I continue to believe in liberal democracy. I believe in liberal democracy because it has an equilibrium factor. It dwells on the fundamental rights of every Nigerian. It protects the rights of minorities, and it holds those in power to account specifically, and it limits executive recklessness. And that's why I continue to believe in liberal democracy. And I hope that a lot of Nigerians will fight and aspire for us to get to the point where those in power cannot just walk over the people who elect them. And those who elect those in power can understand the powers that they have to decide their future by deciding the kind of people that they elect into office. And more importantly, that their civic responsibility does not start and end in voting. It continues by continuing to hold those in power accountable for all of their actions.
Like we're seeing happening right now. Ayodele Adio, political analyst and managing editor of the Avalon Daily. Thank you so much for this conversation.